All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for our next virtual session through Erie Arts and Culture's Pro Network. My name is Patrick Fisher, and I'm the Executive Director of Erie Arts and Culture. We're the regional arts agency for Northwestern Pennsylvania. The Pro Network is funded in part by the National Endowment for the Arts. This evening, we're joined by Ian F. Thomas, a professor at the College. Oops. And if everybody can please, as they enter into the call, make sure that your mic is muted so that we cut down on feedback. Ian F. Thomas earned his BFA in Ceramic and Painting Studies at Slippery Rock University and an MFA in Ceramics at Texas Tech University. His research explores traditional and non-traditional ceramics, sculpture, printmaking, painting, and installation. Thomas has exhibited at the David Winton Bell Gallery, Virginia Museum of Art, Fuller Craft Museum, Bellevue Museum, and the Nasher Sculptural Museum. His work has been exhibited in China, Slovakia, Dubai, and Tel Aviv, as well as across the United States. His work has also been included in over a dozen publications. Additionally, he has presented lectures and workshops at over 25 institutions, including Harvard University, Cornell University, Queens College, and Syracuse University. Thomas is an assistant professor at Allegheny College in Meadville, PA. Thank you for being with us this evening, Ian. And we'll go ahead and hand the mic over to you.
Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for taking the time out of your evening. And I would like to thank Patrick and Erie's Arts and Cultures for letting me talk for a bit. I'm going to try to, I would say that I'm going to do my best. I think that this format, the new format, the way in which that we communicate through these screens, I guess we've been doing it for a while, but the way that I've been interacting, I'm going to try to do my best and try to be engaging as best I can. I'm going to show a little bit of a presentation. This really is kind of some of the more boring aspects of art. I think that the making is so exciting, and I think that that is kind of what brought me to it. I also struggled with writing, still struggle with writing as I've aged. And so I think that having this be something that is just a necessity is something that I'm going to touch on. So I'm going to switch, I guess. And so you have to bear with me here a bit. I'm going to switch a bit and I'm going to pull up the presentation. One of the things that's going to happen is that I have some links I'm going to toggle to. I'm going to show some people's statements and things. Instead of parceling those out, I went ahead and just made links so I can go to the website and stuff. And if I'm going to try to give you some time if you want to jot things down, or if you, I probably could make a list or something with that would have some links and stuff like that, or I could maybe share the presentation with Patrick, and that way you guys could have those links. So I'm going to switch to screen share. Are we all there? Is this working? Does everybody see this? Patrick on?
Yes, sir.
Can you see this? I'm just believing that this is working. I'm in total faith. You can watch me stumble through PowerPoint. But I think this is like stumbling through PowerPoint. I think that's like, isn't that how like this all works? So, like I said, some of the things that I'm going to try to cover are thoughts on applying to things. And what I mean by that is not just applying for exhibition's sake. I mean, so many of these applications that you may be looking at or you may want to apply to are going to need the secondary stuff. They're going to need a bio, an artist statement, a resume. I am going to touch on portfolio development, but it's going to be very rather small. I'm going to kind of focus a bit more on the other things. Normally, I would cover this type of information along with like website development and sort of personal branding. I would probably do that over an entire semester as a class. So I'm sure that this 1 hour or 45, however long this ends up being, will be just enough time to, catch up with all that stuff. And so, got to use these exciting transitions. This is probably not going to be the most exciting presentation that you've ever been part of. So I'm going to try to have moments that are cute now and then. One of the things that whenever you're writing this material is that if you have a call, if you see something, or if like there's an organization that's calls for something, and you need to give a bio, a resume, a curriculum vitae, CV, or resume, whatever the length would be. I just kind of put some loose numbers down here, like if 100 people apply, 1,000 words per submission. You're at like the juror, the administration is going to have to read 400 pages. And so one of the things that, and a 500-word bio is extremely long. But one of the things you got to keep in mind whenever you're writing these things is that you want to be pretty concise, and they don't need to be laborious. One of the things that we can run into is that often people really want to give more than they're asked for, and meaning that we have all these sorts of things that happen within our lives that can impact the things that we make, but they may not be seen. And if they're not seen, it becomes much more difficult for you to be able to detach yourself from how important maybe a life-changing moment was. But if that life-changing moment is in no way seen or impacted within your work, sometimes it's hard to say. So can I get this stuff off of here? There we go. Comically here, we're talking proofread. You want to make sure that you have things. I've jured a number of different things. And one of the things that come up often is that when you have any misspellings, and I think the artist is going to be an artist is going to be viewed as there's a bit more tolerance that's going to be put in for an artist at times, good or bad. I think that's just something that happens. But often we have these moments where we don't get to talk. Maybe you're not ever have met the person. You may never will meet the person, and only the packet's going to speak for you. And so a person that you're applying to may very well be a very meticulous person when it comes to writing, and you don't want that person to be misjudging your artwork because your writing has small issues. And so you don't want to let these things get in the way. Everything that you're doing is in support of your work. Your work is the most important thing. And so you want to try to do the best things that you can. And there we go. Come on. There we go. You got to take it seriously. I despise doing all this stuff. I'm not talking to you right now, but I despise doing the paperwork of art. Whenever I was a young maker, I was sort of cultivated into art. My parents kind of pushed me to be an artist because it was the only thing that I would hold my attention span as a child. And so I was always very bad at writing. I think that I'm a little bit dyslexic, but it's never been satisfied. I've never had a test or anything. But what I'm getting at here is just how much we may dislike this component. But if we're going to be a business, and if we're going to try to push ourselves forward, these just the bio statement, these kind of minutia bits of the art practice are just a 100%. They're just not going to go away. They're just unbelievably needed. So we need to take them seriously. And so here's a cute cat to keep things lively. So whenever you're looking at writing a bio, you want to keep things simple. The information, like I was saying before, it should be relevant to your art. These things are going to kind of support you as you start to do things. It can help legitimize you. Patrick just read my bio. A lot of that is also a way to make like I might know what I'm talking about. And so one of the most important things to keep in mind is you have got to write in the third person. I say that as an academic who like grades and reads papers, so I'm saying you have to write in third person. I would say better off. It's more. There are people who don't, and there are people who are successful who don't. But when reading a bio that is written in first person, as when I'm a juror, I tend to find that it sounds weird. Often if you are talking about accolades that you've done in the first person, it sounds a little arrogant. I've done this and I've done that. Whereas written in the third person, it kind of distances yourself. And quite honestly, the reader doesn't know who the writer was. I may have written the bio that Patrick read. Also, Nate Warner may have written that bio. So we don't necessarily know who could write it. Each statement is going to be different, and your statement is going to be very different than my statement. My bio, just because they're just the thumbprint. They're sort of the written thumbprint of your experiences. And so some things that you can consider are like where you're based out of. You can say where you're from, if indeed that makes sense, if it has anything to do with your work. I'm going to show you an artist's statement that does make sense, that he talks about where he's from. What you make, the ideas, the materials, and achievements if you have them. And if you don't, you will. So it's all right. It's all going to work out. As you can see, I'm not going to read this, but this is what Patrick kind of went over, and so this is one of those things that where you build things, they can start to you can start to amass this. Whenever I first started, I didn't have anything to put down, and that is just part of it. Or you may feel like you haven't done much, but I think that when you really start to think about the things that you may or may have not done, you might have done more than you think. And if you feel like you haven't done a lot, just know that that's where everybody feels. Everyone's felt that, or not. When I teach quite regularly, especially to young students, they feel like they have done nothing. But there's ways to work around that. There's ways to build language that are just a little bit more vague, but still sort of give you, still kind of put you into a standard. So this statement, and Silas Mara ceramics work and paintings examine urban blight with the aesthetic expression of neoliberal ideology. So if we finish reading this, we see, Morrow sounds like he knows what he's talking about. He's apparently from Seattle and he lives in Western Pennsylvania a little bit. This is an example. This is a student's. This is a real student. Silas is one of my students. This is his bio that he's written. It fits into the kind of canon language without being too dense. That kind of makes it sound like he's got this sort of polished bio, when really, like, Silas has shown at campus a couple times. I think that he has shown in Seattle a couple times. That's where he's from, and he's shown in like one other exhibition. So he doesn't have a ton to work with, but he has enough to sort of build some of the language that's going to make him sound like he's doing, like he knows what he's doing. I'm going to pull up some different examples, and so this is going to pull out of PowerPoint and go back into Chrome and back and forth. So I hope that you can tolerate that. But this is just kind of how I tend to teach. This is Trevor King. I recommend, if you don't know his work, look at it. Oh, by the way, the people that I'm showing, the artwork that I'm showing you is of artists that are early to mid-career, mainly earlier career, and within 15 years of making. And the reason that I'm doing that is because it's one thing to have these bios and these big statements that are from super juggernaut people within the field. But I often think that reading people who have been in the field less kind of be a little bit more important. I'm not going to read all of this for you, but I recommend that you go to Trevor King. It's trevorkingart.com. And Trevor here, one of the examples that I wanted to, pull up here is King grew up in Butler. Trevor was my student years ago. And so I've also grown up in Butler. And so whereas I don't have, being born in Butler, a lot of the artwork that I make does not necessarily talk about job loss or post-industrial landscapes. And, I don't have the same connection. But for him, he has it because it makes sense. So I also mentioned earlier about how a statement should be short. This is Trevor's full on his website biography. On your website, you can really have as much information as you want. If you want to write a novella about yourself and put it on your website, that's great. But when applying to things, I know for sure when I talk to Trevor, he does not include this full large statement. But so it comes down to you. If you have a lot to say and you want to say a lot, there's a place to put that. This would be if I was a juror or an arts admin in some situation, someone sent me this much. I assure you, if I had to read another 100 of these, I would skim this very quickly and move on. Another one here is Eric Charlton. And we're just going to go to Eric's about. Eric, American artist originally from the foothills of Appalachian Mountains. I think that this is a poetic way of saying Stoneborough, if you guys all know Stoneborough. So there's also ways that you can romanticize where you're from, if it makes sense. And we can kind of see, Eric is a colleague of mine, but he's earned his MFA at Syracuse. He's done a couple things. But what I'm more interested in is offering you a place where you can kind of hunt down some things. So, like I said, you can go and read Trevor's, you can hunt down Eric's, but this isn't, it kind of starts out again, like where he's from, some of the things that he's exploring within his work, and then it kind of goes into some of the things that he's done. Lauren Erdrich is also early, probably mid-career, early mid-career artist, New York-based, also under 35, I would say. Hers is a little bit more poetic. Water, the ultimate disobeyer of boundaries, takes a primary role in my process. So she's starting off with a little bit more, with a thing, with a descriptor. She's kind of bringing us into the story of her work. And so I think that these can be semi-poetic, like where she's kind of talking about this and then weaving in. But still, even here, we have at the bottom, we have a very kind of clinical bio where it's, I've done these residency, I've gone to these schools, I've done these things, and so I will, we'll kind of look at that. So this is Lauren Erdrich's. Oh, this is Wes's artist statement. Sorry, I didn't want his artist statement. Beep, beep, beep. Here we go. And I'm trying to pick a good bit. Ha's web form is a little small, but this is Ha Zhang. She just took a position at, I believe, Cincinnati School of Art, I think, or Columbus, one of the two. But one of the, like, Ha's a good example where her even her bio is in support of the work that she does. As she writes here, Ha is a multidisciplinary artist born in South China, grew up in suburban Maryland, and came to adulthood in Appalachia. One of the things that her work is definitely, she's tying in already kind of what her work is about. So there's a little bit here about the concepts that she's dealing with in her work. And while that could be parceled out for an artist's statement, it's sort of built in here. So she was the process medium to convey in the intersectional concepts of craft, colonialism, and femininity. So she ties in a little bit into her bio about, so one of the things that you're going to run into is like, how much do you want to give? Pretty much this stuff is sort of the standard hoopla. And it's all of us who are artists who are trying to act like we know what we're doing. It's like we're just feeding stuff all the time. Like, look what I've done, look what I've done. But that doesn't need to be there. They can be short and they can be sweet. Andrea Moon. Pretty straightforward. This is also classy. This, the bee born. If you want to tell people how old you are, I don't like to tell people how old you are. I tell my young students to not tell people how old they are, only because often it can go against you, where it's like, well, this person's only 19, what could they know? And also I would say the other way, this person's 55, shouldn't they have done more by now? So I often think that using, while it is museum ready, like everything in museums always sort of do this type of thing, I don't necessarily know if it's necessary. But Andrews is again, third person, but these are all third person, right? But they're all very, this is where I went to school, this is where I grew up. They're very just informational. And again, they're third person. Um, there are things that you can do to cheat if you want. There is this delightful thing. So it's 500letters.org. It takes you to a different page right away, but there's some things that you can click on. But you can, because art in a lot of ways have become so formulaic, um, these things can just be, this isn't all my information, I'm just writing stuff. But things have become so formulaic that it's often um, that people have made these wonderful cheat sheets. I saw them in grad school that definitely had where you would like pick from column A, pick from column B. But if we look over here on the right, so this is a very simple form, like I said, it's 500 letters. Ian Thomas is an artist who mainly works with sculpture by choosing mainly formal solutions. Thomas creates, intense personal moments, masterfully creates by means of rules of omission. So this taps into a lot of the tropes of what a bio can be. This gets a little bit between, this is a little bit more artist statement, a little bit. I've had people use this. I would never tell you to ever use this and just cut and paste this out. But I do want you to know that these things exist. But you could, if you're really struggling and you really don't know what to write, that a silly thing like this form could help tease out some things that, there might be a sentence or two, that there might be something that might be able to kind of help do that. And again, that's 500letters.org. It's totally cheating, 100%. If you copy this, like for sure, a cut and paste, I don't know an artist really. My friends and I've all shared this a bunch. You're going to run into someone who knew where it came from. So that's kind of the bio. So I guess like the big things about the bio before I move on to this cute little puppy here is keep it pretty short. I wrote 500 words on there. Do not have it be 500 words. You probably could do it in a shorter. Again, if you want it on your website or you want to have more, if you want to talk about more, you can always, your website is like your house online. But when you're applying for things, you got to think about the burden that you're going to be putting onto other people and how much that they want. And also, like, what type of thing would you want to scan? Like, if somebody is going to scan it, like, what kind of information in there? And if it's important to you that where you're from or where you're living, definitely I 100% include those things. I include where I'm from, I include where I teach, and I include the artist statement is a much more difficult task than the bio. I mean, I think the bio is a bit of, just close your eyes and imagine that you had a Wikipedia page. What would that Wikipedia page say if it were short? Artist statements can become much more struggle. I think they're much harder. I think that for myself, that there are two main types of artist statements. There's general statements that are going to kind of be the umbrella that's going to go over your entire work, all the things that you make. And sometimes that's all you need. My graduate professor, Juan Granados, wrote an artist statement in like 1988 and is still using it because everything he makes fits into it. And then there's specific artist statements. The specifics ones, I used to write specific ones quite a bit, but they usually are about a body of work or a particular piece. And I'll show just a couple examples. I don't want to over labor it. But one of the things like that I encourage students to do or encourage just people in general, or some things that I do, is that I would just pick a person and I would just explain to them what I do. It helps if they kind of don't know what you're working on, or you just have a friend that you can just talk about and just record the audio, record the conversation. What's my work about? What am I working on? What are the things that are important to me? And then sometimes it's easier. I tend to be a talker more than I'm a writer, of course. And so often that I want to, it's easier for me to get things out that way. Questions I definitely ask myself when I'm doing this: what am I making? Why am I making it? Can I effectively explain it to a non-artist? And could my mom understand it? what I'm saying. My mom is not an artist. She is definitely like higher education than I have. Like she's definitely a brilliant woman, um, but she's not an artist. And so I think that in the late 80s and 90s for sure, and I think there was a trickle into the early 2000s where writing densely was a thing, and trying to almost exclude people. I do not think that that is the case. I would not write that way now. I think that if you read an artist statement that sounds crazy dense and almost pompous, it's going to be off-putting. So how can you effectively talk about your work in a simple way that a lay person, so to say, can understand? Mine is not a really good example to follow. I am 44 years old, so I guess I've been doing art for, I don't know, 40 years or whatever. And so I've been writing artist statements since the 90s. And I used to do specific ones and would write them for every piece or every group of pieces. And then a few years ago, probably in my early 40s, 40, 41, I just kind of arrived at something that's more, a little bit more poetic. For me, it does have a little, I am an academic, so it does have a little bit of academic talk in it a little bit. And when it really comes down to it, I think at the core, the last sentence, I made these things at some point in my past while trying to live in that past present. Pretty much I'm like verging on a midlife crisis. I'm trying to figure out what my life is about. For anyone who's over 40, or you might understand these things, but and so I just wanted to have a statement that kind of reflected where I am in my life at the time, which is very different than the things that I've done before. And so that's kind of why I would say, especially if you're building your career, it's harder to kind of have statements that are like these. But there's definitely another artist who has a general statement, Taylor White. Taylor White is definitely also very kind of poetic. My work gives form to fleeting memories and a dormant mania crawling beneath the carpet of a Western home. So your artist statement can be as poetic as you want. If they're really long, they're going to be hard for people to read. Again, we want to keep these things fairly short. If you can't say it in 3 to 10 sentences at most, let's say 3 to 5, 3 to 6 sentences, chances are you don't know what you're doing, or you haven't distilled down yet to more of what you're looking forward, what you want. But that's not to say there's really good statements that are big. This is Guy's work. She does a collaborative work with Lando. Guy's is a little longer. She is a master draftsman. She's a wonderful drawer. Her work, if you do look up her work, just so that you know, it's very erotic or sexual in content. But I'm concerned by the objectification tradition of academic figures represented in the artistic nude. She's got a lot here that are just sort of just general kind of feelings toward things. The drawing set forth from my own skin as my fingers apply chalk to the paper. Paper itself is like skin. So again, we kind of this very poetic quality. But that's if you are that person. If you are a more clinically cold person, then and your work is that way, then your statement should read that way. You're kind of stacking all of these things, to support one another. If you think about branding or an advertisement, this is just another part of the brand. Whether I hate all that brand stuff, but it just is what it is. And here we're gonna look at Ryder Richards a little bit. Ryder's is a little bit lengthy, but it's not too bad. But Ryder is a Texas-based artist. Also early mid-career, growing up in Texas, so he kind of has, he ties back into sort of where he kind of grew up and stereotypes engaging, and so, cultural systems. So a lot of his work is that he writes a lot, and it's very dense writing. He's also an art writer. And so, but these at the core are sort of general statements. They kind of talk about a lot of the generalness of their work as a whole. So they're not specifically about a piece, but they're about all of the things that they make. And so that is one way to do it. I will admit, if you can kind of nail a general statement, it is going to be easier for you, because then when someone asks for a call, then you can pull out a general statement. Artists like Byron Rich, Byron writes and crafts a statement for every single piece that he does. Byron's work is not, he is a new media artist, and within that new media, and I don't even know if new media, I don't, he's just like a sculptor on the front edge, right? So he's kind of like the sharp edge of a knife. And so he's doing a lot of different things. And so within that, he needs to be able to convey to he doesn't have the same continuity as, like, let's say, an acrylic abstract painter has. Acrylic abstract painter may be working on a big body of work of 20 paintings that are all sort of the same. Byron is more like an architect in that he crafts and designs one piece and sees it through execution. And then but then within this, so Byron has these artist statements that go with each piece, and often quite lengthy. Because especially like with this one, for the cooking of sex, this is about, like, estrogen hacking within foods. That you just looking at these pictures, it's kind of like the doctor's version of HelloFresh. Like, you wouldn't necessarily know 100% what you're looking at. And so his artwork needs that kind of text support. And so I think that he is a great an example of writing specific text for each piece. This is considerably more daunting if you hate writing, but I believe that this can be very good. I used to do a lot of this, like writing about one piece thing. And after doing it for 20 years, I just kind of got tired of it. Eli Blasco is also, Eli's a very young artist, but Eli also will write about exhibitions, or he'll write kind of about the piece. Each work was a distinct exploration of how one's body experiences and or daily routine may disrupt and befuddle. So you can write either, like I said, very specifically or not, but it's up to you to kind of figure out which way you want to go and what makes the most sense for your work. You're going to want to resist including information that is not relevant. I'm very comically of this dog here on the beach, but if you do like long walks on the beach, but you make portrait paintings, leave the beach out. If you've had a life-changing experience that has nothing to do with anything and you can't tie it back visually in any way that makes sense, I don't know, maybe if you were like, my aunt was in a double-decker bridge that crashed down and she had like a bolt come up. Anyhow, it was a horrid story, like it changed her life. But anything that she's done after that, like that's a super story, that might make sense. But it's really hard to tie in these, you inside your vessel looking out, all the bits and pieces of your life. And while something may be extremely life-changing for you, no one may be able to see that within your work or really be able to connect to it. And so it may not just make sense. So you want to make sure that these things are supporting your work, supporting the paintings that you're making, or the sculptures, the installations, the public pieces, whatever those things might be, in such a way that if someone sees your work and they hunger for more, they go to the artist statement, they read the artist statement, it makes sense and it pairs. And the same thing with the bio. They love the work, they read the artist statement, they want to know more, they read the bio. All of these things are working together as a package. And statements can be very short. And so this is Hector Ramirez's statement. So just down here, this is a memory of a place I grew up. The exhibition is rooted in the vernacular of the Mexican-American working class. Its sculptures explore the aesthetics and materials adaptations, work through culture, necessity, and language. I mean, this is a super, super simple, right to the point artist statement. So don't think that artist statements need to be crazy and hard and complicated. They can be short, they can be poetic, they can be complicated. It's just great if they like kind of coalesce with your work, like I was saying. And so we got a baby goat. I'm going to touch on this, and that's really kind of artist statements. So again, bios, short to the point, kind of your little baby Wikipedia page. Artist statements, just to rehash, what would you tell a friend about your work? What would you tell a stranger about your work? What would you tell an artist about your work? How can you say that in eloquent language? If you like to use that uh, heavy language, one of the things that I would keep in mind, one of my really good friends is a poetry professor down in South Carolina, and he always makes fun of artists for trying to use language that's too dense for no reason. So, we should be trying to be able to say the things that we want to convey within a very concise and clean manner so that the biggest audience we can connect to it and do it. I'm going to talk a little bit about, oh yeah, look at it jump. I can't stand all these transitions. I'm going to talk a little bit about CV. And so CV is a curriculum vitae, and it's a brief account of a person's education qualifications. You're going to see the word CV. If you're new to all this, you're going to see the call for entries, for the call for proposals. They're going to ask for the CV a lot. They'll say, like, give us a 2-page CV. I mean, that's not really a CV. CVs are usually for academia. They're usually like horribly long, describe like every class you've ever taught. Really what most places are going to ask for is what is traditionally thought of as a resume, where it's a brief account of your personal things. One of the things to keep in mind is that if you're applying for something and they ask for a 2-page resume, and you give them a 2-page resume, don't give them your 7-page CV. Trying to give 1 to 2 pages. 1 page is almost impossible for an artist if you've shown much. And one of the things that I would say that you can do too is this is that kind of a typical CV construction, is you're gonna kind of have a header. You're gonna start with your education. I'll pull up my CV so you can look at it though. Like your current position, if it's relevant, exhibitions, residencies, and these can kind of be in any order that you want them to be. And so one of the things that just like the bio, the CV starts out small. It starts out as a little thing. So here I have my header. And you can kind of interchange these pieces, but I have my header here. My professional appointment. This is an old resume. I just pulled up the first one I could find. Where I went to school. So this is my like longer CV. I went with residencies. You can kind of do this in whatever order you want. Publications. I wanted things that just felt a little bit, that felt more important to me to be in an order. People do scrutinize it though. A little bit about minutia when building your resume. Until you start having a good bit of 2-person or solo exhibitions, just lump it all together as exhibitions until you have enough. And then once you start to have enough solo exhibitions or 2-person exhibitions, then you can start to break them out. And this looks like I haven't done anything in 5 years, but anyhow, another trick also is to write selected. Selected implies in itself that you have done more, that you've just chosen these ones to share. And so it's something to think about in terms of that. And then I have separated out to the group exhibitions. So until I had gotten enough, probably until maybe 2000, if I look here, 2012, like I didn't feel like I had enough solos to really kind of justify having that as a separate section. I just had it all grouped in as just exhibitions. I didn't write group, just exhibitions. I would recommend looking at a ton of different artists' resumes and CVs to kind of start to see if you can find something that makes sense for you. This is a big CV. This is like, not that my CV is big, like just that the CV itself is big. One of the things is like, that's for like applying for jobs, or like people will ask for a full CV. More often than not, people want a kind of condensed version. Like, this is what I'm doing, education, here's some residencies. Again, I have publications next. Again, this is pretty old, 2013. Solo and 2-person shows. And so depending on what you've done, if you're in some permanent collections, you can include those. But it's really kind of up to you where you want to put things. But most calls are going to ask you for one or the other. so an RFP, like a call for proposals, they're going to ask you specifically. We want a bio, an artist statement, we want a 2-page CV, and we want images. And so you just want to make sure that you're applying, that you apply with the right one. Don't give them extra. Again, as I'd mentioned right away, you don't want to give people too much whenever they're judging a ton of stuff. If you Google the go back, CAA CV. CAA is a College Art Association. They have a really nice section on their website that talks about how to build a CV. They go into exactly like how to put the date but like I could do it. It'd take a half hour, or you could just spend some time clicking around on there. So if you could just Google CAA space CV or CAA curriculum vitae, it's really going to give you like the kind of the real fine minutia, like where to put the date, how like tab over twice, like how to kind of footnote things. Should I footnote things and like publications and things like that. Again, if we go back to Trevor's CV, Trevor is a practicing artist. He's not a teacher. And so he's calling this a CV, but it's still, so he's got things broken out: solo exhibition, group shows, jury shows, curatorial projects. You want to have the things be pretty relevant. You just want to make sure that you're picking and choosing. Like, he doesn't have on here that he had a summer job as a roofer. That just isn't relevant for the things that he might may or may not be applying for as well. And I think Eric's CV on here? I thought I had Eric's CV on here for a reason. But so I definitely would recommend looking again. Here we go. To the CAAs. Like, so they, the collegeart.org, it doesn't have a ton, I don't think it has a ton of great stuff. A lot of stuff you need to like pay to get behind. But they definitely have everything broken down: education, how to do it with the date. And so I definitely would highly recommend picking around through that. So I guess before I move on to the little portfolio thing, just to make sure, like with the resume, you just want, or the CV or resume, you just want to keep up with it. And if a show was a big deal to you, but it's kind of been nowhere, you just got to slowly pick and choose over time what you keep and what you leave out. I often will say yes to a lot of exhibitions or lecture opportunities that I don't think that are going to like really help my career, but they're things I want to be engaged with my community in. And so I will still do those things, but they're not necessarily going to go on my resume or my CV. And so as you start to develop things, you just want to pick and choose what's going to present you in the best light possible. Sometimes like a 3-page resume or CV that has like really good shows at good locations is way more impressive than a 15-page tell-all story of your entire life. So I'm just, I knew that this would take a long time. I've been talking for 45 minutes or whatever. I'm just quickly going to go over a portfolio. And it's not going to be at length. It was mentioned that I would go over a little bit, so I'm going to go over a little bit. But what I have here is an actual PowerPoint, okay? And so what I want to use is that a lot of things that I run into is people don't know how to make, like, how do I put my images together? How do I do things? First and foremost, I would say I was an anti using your phone person for a long time. Like, don't use your phone, because the phone cameras just weren't good enough. They are totally good enough now. They may not be good enough to make like a 4-foot by 6-foot poster, but they are definitely good enough. Just make sure that your lens is clean. If your phone camera is dusty or looks hazy, kind of like an 80s sitcom, 80s romance show, like if your lens is dirty, borrow someone else's phone or use a traditional camera. There's absolutely, the camera's still better, but you want to have like pretty decent pictures. But as you can see, I built this all, and this is the portfolio that I would apply for things, for jobs. It's this thing that I apply for shows. This is completely built in PowerPoint, so I can have text It's also a way for me often that they would have exhibitions where they would say, or exhibition calls where they're asking for 20 images. I interpret that as 20 slides. This is a way for me to show this piece on the left and kind of show the resource material on the right. And I can still, I was able to get into there some text very simply. One of the nice things about whenever you build them in PowerPoint, you could do this in Google Slides too. I'm not being like Microsoft, I use Google Slides for almost everything now. But I'm able to put a lot of the information in here in a clear way. Often I've seen people who will make an image sheet for their portfolio. So they have like pretty good pictures. They don't have any information on the pictures whatsoever. And then they have like this other Word document that I need to open that has like image one, and it has the title, and it has all the things on there, all the pertinent information, like it's always title, material. Then for me, like I hired a day laborer to do work for me, reclaimed iron oxide. So there's kind of this organization system. But to ask a viewer to go ping pong back between your portfolio and a portfolio sheet or an image list sheet is very difficult. I find doing it in this way is very easy. And so one of the things that I'm showing here, a lot of these things are sort of like performance-esque pieces where there's kind of things going on. So I'm matching like goods that I've done. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that as you're building your portfolio, when you're applying for things, is to try to have some continuity within that. And one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that if you're applying for something, you want them to be as relevant as possible to the call, but also to themselves. And so they're not just a handful of disjointed objects. So try to group like things. If I was going to apply with pots, I make pots, like these are going to be separate. I'm going to use like a clean, crisp background. You can just buy these like super easy backgrounds that just, they're called fades on, but that you can just stick objects down. And Amazon has taught us all that you can like shoot everything. You can buy those like little light boxes and everything that look like every other thing. But, so if I'm applying for something to do a installation somewhere or to do a mural somewhere, like I'm not going to include these pots, so I make a bunch of different stuff. And so I group those things differently to apply to different things with those. And so I don't want them all to kind of be clustered together. And so, again, this is just, I'm just clicking and, I'm just pulling this out so you can see, I'm just clicking and dragging. This is just PowerPoint and typing it in. One of the other things I want to show you here real quick is, so if you want, so you build all this stuff in PowerPoint, is that you can basically export. So if you go to home or a PowerPoint, you can export this all as a PDF. So all of these slides are going to export out as a single PDF. And so when we're talking about portfolio, like, yeah, okay, so I built it in PowerPoint. Now, how do I share that with somebody? So that you can just, title it Ian Loves Art, whatever you might want to do. Ian Love Art, that's even better. And you just export it. Okay, and so now, whoop, that's hidden behind something. I got one over here. And so now I just have a single PDF. This is a different one, but it's a single PDF of my work. This is older work, but this is a way that I can have it. So it's very much the same thing. It's all made in PowerPoint. Just now it's a single PDF. I like the black background. It doesn't matter. You've just picked. You don't want to use anything competitive for your work. Portfolio is going to be tough. One of the things that I can't stress enough with all of this, and with this will be my last slide, and then of course I'll take any question that you want. If people are still there, I hope you are. You got to build a community. Even today, like I called my friend Ryder. Like a lot of these people that I'm showing you stuff are friends or old students or things, but you need people to be able to send an artist statement to. They don't have to be an artist, but just someone who's willing to read something. Can you read this, like, just for like continuity? Like, my wife is not an artist. She hates all the art language, all the art speak. So she's a great person for me to have to read something and just be like, does a normal person like this? Does it make sense? Or there's spelling errors? You know, I called a friend of mine today about a couple statements and like what he thought about them. And so you just need to build a community so that way you're not trapped, isolated, and which sometimes, especially now, I would say is I think, very difficult time to build a community. Um, but when things, when a virus is figured out or the Band-Aid finally gets pulled back off, we can go to art openings again. Just starting to meet people and engage and participate in these types of things. Just ask people. Because a great deal of all of this preparatory work and building all of these things that has nothing to do with your art practice, like your art making, it's so much easier if you can have bounce ideas and show these things to people. I would say that on a given, if I was going to spend 100 hours in my art practice, probably at least 30 of those, 30% of my time is going to be wasted doing this type of paperwork, portfolio building, changing things, updating my CV, writing a new artist statement. And so in order to be, I feel like, a truly practicing artist, you have to be participating in these things and having a community to share these things with and be able to get feedback. I think can't say enough about how important that is. And with that, I guess, what do I do? Do I just click you or stop share? Boom. Hey, and I'm still there and there's still people here. So Patrick, are you still here? There we go.
So with that, we'd like to open it up to questions. If you have any questions for Ian, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, and Sarah?
Yeah.
Hi.
I'm trying to apply to grad schools this year. What would your advice be regarding like a CV and artist statement and portfolio for that? How is it different from as a practicing artist?
I would I would say the biggest difference will be well, I guess there really isn't going to be that big of a difference. Your resume isn't going to be as important, like that you have had like done a bunch of stuff, because a lot of the students that I've had that have gone on to grad student really haven't done a ton of things. And so I think that your cover letter that you're going to have to write, or your letter of intent, is probably your work is the most important thing. The quality of the pictures that you have so people can see the work the best is going to be the number one thing when they're looking at grad school applications. When they're looking at any art thing, the art's first. Then it's going to be your cover letter, because that's going to flesh out more wholly what you are doing. So you want to just make sure that your letter of intent really kind of shows that you've done the research for the school that you're applying for. And so just make sure that don't write one letter and apply to 10 grad schools. Write a letter for at least where you have sections that you can kind of tailor it so that the person feels like that you're really interested in their program. But I would do the same thing though. I mean, if they're going to ask for 20 pictures of your work, I would try to have it just show what you can do and kind of show how you can think, and just have the pictures be good and have it be well organized. And the resumes can be the same. And I wouldn't feel as though that needs to be a lot, because grad school programs are going to understand where you're at. If you're applying to a grad school, chances are that you haven't lived, like you haven't been practicing for 40 years and are going back. That's still something that does happen. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that is a lot of help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the group?
Hey, this is Karen McKenna.
Hi, Karen.
You mentioned, I mean, and it makes absolute sense on a CV, just to put, things that are relative to your art. But what if art is something you do in addition to something else? I mean, you want to show like you do other things in the world.
I guess
Is there any place on the CV for other stuff?
I think of the other stuff. I guess you need to know what. I guess it would depend on what you were applying for. So I'm going to use a mural for instance. Patrick and I were talking about murals earlier. Like I was a new contract house painter for a while, and I had a crew of guys who used to work with me. I'm using guys generally. There was a bunch of different people. It wasn't just men. But that showed me how to manage a budget and run a crew and be able to get things done in a timeline. There's like these kind of secondary things that would work with for that. So when I was applying for mural things, I definitely included that type of information because I wanted them to know that I'm going to be able, like, if you give me $55,000, I'm going to be able to execute this. I know I'm going to be able to hire hands. I know I'm going to be able to get this done. I know the equipment. And again, so that is a non-art field. I mean, I was just painting houses white. But it definitely showed support in that. So I think that just as long as it makes some degree of sense. But if you're an accountant for 10 years and you paint watercolor painting, you can put that in there. I just don't know if it's going to help you. Other than it's just, I did this thing and I'm proud I did this thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I just don't know if it's going to help, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Thanks.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice. All right, well, thank you so much, Ian. I found that to be wildly informative, very much helpful. For everybody that is in today's session, thank you for joining us this evening. This is being recorded and it will be available probably in the next week or so on Erie Arts and Culture's blog. If you visit our Pro Network webpage, not only will you find a list of local, regional, and national opportunities for artists to apply to, but you'll also find all of our previous webinars dealing with information such as building an artist brand, financial literacy for artists, intellectual property within the creative sector, etc. And again, Ian, I want to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us this evening.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank everybody for your time. I know how time is so valuable now. I just am grateful that you guys spent some time with me. I was happy to do it.
All right. And if anybody wants to follow your work, Ian, how may they do that?
The easiest way or the most constant way is I use Instagram pretty regularly. It's Ian_F_Thomas. And I have a website, ianfthomas.com, has a link to my Instagram on there. Website's horribly out of date, but there's a video on there, I guess.
Actually, I'm going to ask that as a question, Ian, because you've brought that up twice now. You mentioned that your CV looked like you hadn't done anything since 2015, and you just mentioned that your website's a bit out of date. As someone is in the, let's say, emerging to mid-career category of their profession, how often would you recommend updating things like a website and a CV, especially in the world of Instagram, where you might not be uploading images on your website consistently, but you're posting to Instagram new work at least once a day?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I do have an updated CV somewhere on this computer, but I took everything from my desktop and dumped it into one folder because I knew you guys could see my desktop. I just couldn't find it, but I update when I do a thing. If I do a show, I just put it on. If I keep up on it, just adding, then I don't have to think back like, where was that show? What city was that in? So as shows happen, I recommend just immediately updating your resume. It's very easy. It doesn't, it only takes a time. It takes a minute. Website is much more daunting. I use Squarespace and it is pretty easy. It's just a drag and drop, I'm like slowly like in a cave here. It's getting dark out. But I just use Squarespace, drag and drop. It has a real nice feature for e-commerce if you want to sell stuff on there too. And so I like that. But I was almost, because like you said, the Instagram culture that we live in right now, like couldn't be a better platform for artists, right? Like it's just picture based. It's great. Um, and so I was almost, I had a short period of time where I didn't have a website anymore. And I adopted websites like in 94. Like I always had a website. I just think that they really are function really well for artists. But I talked to Dr. Paula Burley, who is our curator, who worked at the Whitney Museum. She works a colleague of mine at school, and I asked her, "Is like, do artists need a website?" And she's like, "Yes, of course they do. Like, because for curators, they need a curators and writers. They need a place that they can actually anchor back to. Like, you can't be included in a paper about artwork if you're just going to be you can't, there's no footnote for Instagram that's going to be viable in an academic paper or in a, so you need a place where you can kind of have that repository. And so I sort of see Instagram as like the casual art. Like if you want to eat my art with your eyes every day, come on by. I'm going to post something every day, every other day. If you want something more formal, or if you need like to be able to cite me, or you need to be able to contact me in a more formal way, that the website becomes that. And so it's sort of like the store, the virtual storefront, you know, whereas like the Instagram's kind of like you're hanging out with me in the studio.
I have one more question based off of that then. So you, within your portfolio, you know, when you're limited to say 10 images and you have to go through and select those images, what's that internal process that you have when you're creating work and going to document that work that you go, this is something I want to include in my portfolio?
I think that for me it's time, because usually I think most people experience this, and whenever they're creative, like the idea is amazing. You know, I think that I've like split the atom. You know, like life's going to be great, the idea is great, and then there's the loss that happens with the making the physical thing. Just making it, there's loss, and then living with it for a little bit. You know, like, or like a performance piece, like did the pictures look good, you know, and then I wait a little bit, and then so usually there's a distance in time that happens where some of the pieces that I've gone back and looked on later, I don't like, and so I don't include, and then there's some things that were kind of more maybe loosely done at the time, and I look back at the pictures, and so the pictures end up meaning quite a bit, unfortunately, but that's how we're judged. I mean, we are judged via the pictures. uh, so it's really, your work isn't as important as the picture of your work, as horrible of a sentence as that is. And I wish it wasn't that way, but that's how, if you apply for something, they're looking 9 times out of 10, they're looking at, I mean, I know Erie's still doing a drop off, or at least they used to, like the Erie spring show still does a drop off where the juror actually gets to see a physical thing. But so few places do it that way anymore. So if your pictures are bad, there's no way for them to, they're just going to think your work's bad.
I think that might be the next title of a presentation. Your work isn't as important as the picture of your work.
Yeah, there we go. It's a sad one. But
Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and end this evening's webinar. Again, thank you, Ian, and everybody who decided to join us on a Thursday evening at 6 o'clock for presentation.
well, thank you, everybody. I wish you all the best and good luck.
All right, have a good one.